What's up, America? This is Dr. Nitin Chhoda, and in this training video, I'm going to answer the question, should you invest new money during this crisis? Now, I know you might be thinking, invest new money? I'm struggling to pay my bills. I get that. But a lot of us, as we start to emerge from this, one day, I promise you, this will be over. One day, all of this will be behind us, and I'm hopeful and confident that that day will come soon. And a part of me, my gut instinct says it will come soon, but one day this will be behind us. One day we'll stop talking about stimulus checks. There won't be thousands and thousands of videos on stimulus checks, and one day we'll get back to life, and life as we know it will come back to normal. Now, with that being said, I think this whole situation, this whole crisis, the fact that we are stuck at home, the fact that we need to reevaluate our financial life, the fact that some of us even need to reevaluate our lifestyle, all of this gives us an opportunity to step back and take stock of this situation and evaluate our financial health. Now, this channel is In Touch EMR, being in touch with your emotional and mental riches. Now, I believe in emotional health, physical, social, spiritual, and intellectual, and I talk about that in other videos on this channel. But I think if you ask the question, should I invest new money during this crisis? The first thing that I would ask you to consider is my financial health in order? So in this training video, I'm going to talk about 3 things that you need to be careful about so that you can answer the question, is my financial health in order? So the 3 things that you need to ask yourself are, do I have smart debt? Number 2, can I practice simple living? And number 3, do I have a financial buffer? So it's smart debt, simple living, and financial buffer. Let's get into each of those points. There are 2 kinds of debt. There's good debt and bad debt. Good debt is debt that allows you to have a better future, that's good for your future. For example, having a mortgage, in my opinion, is an example of good debt because you're building ownership, you're building equity, it gives you a psychological sense of satisfaction that you're owning something, and it is something that over a period of time can build you an asset. It has a lot of tax advantages as well. Good debt could also be a low interest loan, such as the economic injury disaster loan, and any loan that you get at a low interest rate that you can then use to grow your business, assuming you're self-employed, assuming you're a business owner. Good debt, for that matter, is any kind of debt where you borrow at a certain rate, but then the life benefits or the financial benefits are greater than borrowing. So let's say you pay 4 or 5%, but you make 8, 10, 15, 20% through your business or through some other investment. So as much as possible, have good debt. Also, if you have bad debt, which I'm sure a lot of us do, I'm talking about credit card bills or any high interest loans that are more than 8%, 9%, 10%. Student loans, by the way, in my opinion, fall under the category of good debt because they generally tend to be very low interest loans. So, but the high interest loans, as you probably know, need to be paid off first before any other kind of debt, because you want to pay off the more expensive debt first, the bad debt, before you start to work on your good debt. It's okay having some amount of good debt, but you definitely want to pay off debt that's bad debt, that's high interest rate debt, and that really doesn't do anything for your lifestyle. The second thing you need to keep in mind is simple living. Now, all of us, we all have a certain lifestyle, whether it's living in a nice apartment in New York City or living in a small place in the middle of downtown Alabama. The point is, wherever you live, you need to make sure that your expenses are lower than your income. There needs to be a gap between your expenses and your income. As far as possible, cut off unnecessary expenses in your life. Cut off the things that are really not adding any value. And the exercise that I would recommend all of you to do, and this is a tough one, although it sounds simple. I ask a lot of individuals to do this, but it's not really very easy to do because in my experience, not everyone ends up doing it. Take your bank account statement and take your credit card bill, grab a cup of coffee and sit down and analyze it. Look at each of the expenses line item by line item. Look at each expense and ask yourself, do I absolutely need this? And the answer is going to be a simple yes or a no. There's no maybe. The answer should be a simple yes or no. You need to draw a line in the sand. You need to make it black and white. Try not to entertain any gray areas. So again, the question is, do I absolutely need this? If the answer is yes, you keep it. If the answer is no, you cut it out. You will find that as you start cutting out unnecessary expenses, you're able to simplify your life. You're able to reduce the variables and you're able to cut down your expenses, because the simpler your life, the more healthy you'll be, the more lean you'll be financially. Having a lot of unnecessary expenses, I mean, the best analogy I can give you in terms of physical fitness is it's like having a lot of body fat. It sort of holds you back. It makes you heavier. It makes you hard to move. It makes you hard to adjust and adapt. You need to have simple, lean expenses that are absolutely necessary. And if you can have that in place, in other words, if you can have the smart debt, if you can have simple living, and if you can have what I call as a financial buffer, you'll then be in a much better position to invest new money. In fact, if you do these things, you'll probably have more new money to invest, because when you do these things, you'll actually find that because your expenses are lower than your income, you have some money left over, which you're now wondering, what should I do with? And I do want you to put that money to work, and I do want you to make your money grow for you. That's what this channel is all about. But you can only do that if your financial health is in order. So we talked about smart debt. We talked about simple living. Now let's talk about the concept of the financial buffer. The financial buffer is a concept that basically implies that there is a difference between your expenses and your income. It's an extension of the second concept of simple living, because if you have simple living, you can have a financial buffer. If you don't have simple living, in other words, if you live beyond your means, you have that big car payment, you live in a place that's way bigger than what you need, you buy things that you don't need, you have high credit card debt, hopefully you can start to see how all these things sort of interrelate and mingle and mesh together. But if you live beyond your means and you have all those extra expenses, and you have what is essentially the opposite of a simple life, you're going to find that it's not possible to have a financial buffer. Now, let me clarify what I mean by simple life. I don't mean that you should sacrifice every single thing. I mean, if you enjoy a Starbucks latte, or if you enjoy a nice meal once in a while at home at this point in time, obviously, then by all means enjoy yourself. We deserve a lot of good things, but we need to keep our realities, our expectations, our financial expenses under control. We can't let it get out of control, which is when people start to complicate their lives, buy things they don't need, buy cars that are way more expensive than what they need, live in homes and rent apartments that are way more than what they need. So if you can practice simple living and simplify your living, you'll then have a financial buffer, which leads me to the third point, the financial buffer. The financial buffer is the gap between your income and your expenses. The greater the financial buffer, the more money you'll have to invest, the more cash you'll have, so you can deploy it in the midst of a recession, in the midst of a bad market, so you can jump on opportunities that others couldn't, that others simply weren't able to do. So having a financial buffer, a gap between your expenses and your income, is crucial, because now it gives you some sort of capability to deploy that capital when opportunities arise. So again, the concepts are smart debt, simple living, and the concept of the financial buffer. It's only when you have these three things in place, that's when you have a strong financial foundation. When you have a strong financial foundation, it's then that you want to go ahead and deploy new capital, because then you'll be emotionally in the right headspace so you can make the right decisions. Now, in another one of my trainings, I talked about how not to invest during this crisis, because I'm noticing a lot of individuals are trying to capitalize on opportunities and invest in the stock market and rush into the stock market, primarily because it's the trading doesn't cost anything. There are no trading fees, if you will. There are no commissions. They're gone now. But this approach can lead to massive short-term fluctuations in your money, and you don't want that. The whole idea of financial health is to have your money in a stable and boring and predictable growth mode. Now, again, I've been investing for the past 10 to 15 years. I've invested in stocks. I buy a lot of single family real estate. I own my businesses. I buy other businesses. I'm also an angel investor. And what I've found is that when you have a 5, 10, 15, 20 year perspective, you tend to come out significantly ahead. Now, the problem with this kind of financial approach, again, it goes back to the question, should you invest new money during this crisis? The problem with this kind of an approach for most people is that it is boring. Guess what? Successful investing is boring. I know that we have a temptation to do things that seem fun, that seem sexy, where we can double our money or triple our money quickly, and where we can make 10% in a week. But I would advise you to resist that temptation. That's definitely not something I'm going to talk about in this channel ever. I'm not here to teach you short-term strategies, because if I did that, I would be doing you a disservice. And what I want to do for my subscribers is to give you a strong financial foundation. And this is the time to build that foundation. We're in the middle of a worldwide crisis. Unemployment is at all-time highs. The price of oil went negative, and states are running out of money, and the federal government is trying to ramp up testing while still making sure everybody gets their stimulus checks. So we are in essentially something that's never happened before in the history of our country, in the history of the world. And I want you to double down on the fundamentals. I want you to go back to the basics, because that's what I'm doing myself. What I have done as an investor through the years is buy companies that I really wanted to buy and hold on to over the long term, and that's helping me during this period. In fact, during this period, I myself am making sure that I practice smart debt, and I've always lived simple. I always lived below my means, and that's something that essentially was something that came naturally to me, and I would encourage all of you to do the same. And as far as the third component is concerned, the financial buffer, the more of a buffer you have, the more of an opportunity you'll have to capitalize on opportunities like I talked about. So in a nutshell, everyone, a long-term time frame of investing is what you should have. And if you have new money to invest during this crisis, try to invest it in things that you feel comfortable owning. You go to bed, waking up in the morning, not worried about what the price is tomorrow, what the price is 6 months from now, but you're more concerned about what the price will be 10, 15, 20 years from now, because no one knows what's going to happen in the stock market a few weeks, or even a few months from now. No one knows the outcome of the election. No one knows how it's going to impact the stock market. No one really knows what's going to happen, how quickly states will open up, how quickly testing will ramp up. We don't know whether we'll get our jobs back as quickly as we should. So these are the short-term uncertainties that you really shouldn't bank on. What you should bank on is definitely smart debt, simple living, and definitely having some sort of a financial buffer that will then give you the capital that you need to deploy during these challenging times. And that in turn will allow you to be emotionally in the right space. That will allow you to be psychologically in the right space so you can make better decisions. Because remember, deploying new capital is important, but also knowing what not to invest in is important. And again, I covered that in another training video on this channel. So if you enjoyed or if you benefited from this training, please go ahead and comment below. Please click like, please click subscribe, and definitely smash the notification button so you can get more news and updates to improve your financial life and to improve your overall investing psychology. My goal is to help you have a long-term basis for your financial future, not just talk to you about the stimulus check or the bills, because those things are trends right now. Those things are things that everyone's talking about right now. But again, one day this crisis will be over. One day we look back at this and say, we got through this. And at that point in time, our financial health, whether we can practice smart debt, whether we can practice simple living and build a financial buffer, those things will matter more than ever. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the individuals who have those things in place are able to tide this situation out, whereas the ones who didn't, who have a very high level of debt, who live beyond their means, whose expenses were greater than their income, and who essentially were not able to have any financial buffer, no savings in the bank, those are the individuals who are having a hard time during this crisis. So it just goes to show that these fundamentals matter. Again, this sounds boring, but it's the boring stuff that works. And I think at this point in time, in the history of our nation, in the history of our lives, in the context of our overall financial well-being, it's important for us to go back to the basics. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, click like below. Please click subscribe. Please smash the notification button and please click comment. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next training. Thanks.